Spurs take on the Knicks tonight, and are the Spurs still in the race for Wembanyama?
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey guys, this is Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, and you are listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia. It's morphin' time.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs and the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Kens 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you back. Hey, the Spurs take on the Knicks tonight, and we're going to be looking at tonight's game out in Madison Square Garden. What do the Spurs got to do to erase that bad taste they have from playing the Nets in Brooklyn? It wasn't even a contest. And also, are the Spurs shooting themselves to the foot when it comes to the chase for that top 3 spots in the NBA draft? We're going to be discussing that and a lot more right here on Locked On Spurs. Thanks for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Make sure to go to betonline.net right now. They got you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. Who is joining me today? He is back, everybody. I bet he's raring to go to get back on the mic. He is Michael Jimenez of San Antonio Sports Star. And make sure to follow him on Twitter at MikeESPNSA. Jimenez, you got to be itching to get back on the mic now, right? How long you been away?
18 days, man. I haven't been on air in 18 days. I'm going to head into the studio wondering if I still know how to do radio, man. What are all these buttons for, right? So I'm excited to get back in there and get the show started.
When do you go back?
Today, yeah.
Oh, today's the day. Okay.
So actually, the new show name has gone from Halftime with Mike Jimenez to simply Jimenez and Spence. So my new co-host is Tim Spence. You heard him a couple of times on air with me in December. And we're getting going today. It's the first show of the year, and I'm super excited.
Sounds good. What time is the show? Because it's a new slot, right? Like a little longer than the normal halftime?
Well, all the shows on San Antonio Sports Star, as of today, got an hour longer. So
Okay.
R&R in the morning, which was originally from 7 to 10, is now 6 to 10. My show, which was originally noon to 2, is now noon to 3.
Okay.
And the Blitz, which was 4 to 7, is now 3 to 7. So San Antonio Sports Star added 3 extra hours of local radio.
Look at that. More Jimenez, everybody. An extra hour of Michael Jimenez on the radio dial. But look, let's get into it. And one thing that I know Jimenez is all about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, you've been kind of captain of Team Tank, right? You see the price at the end of the tunnel. That'd be either Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson or just a top 3 pick. Am I correct? You've been all about the tank, right?
I've been all about the tank for over a year. And it's a very weird thing to be a part of because, I'm a huge Spurs fan. And I'm not a T-shirt fan. I am a born and raised Spurs fan, Hemisphere Arena Spurs fan. Every single finals year, but beyond that, the 21 and 61 year of the late 80s, I would go to those games. I'm a huge Spurs fan. At the same time, I'm looking at it thinking to myself, every single win the Spurs get actually hurts the team in the long run. And it's very, very unusual because, I'm there watching the Spurs and Mavericks with my dad, and it's so exciting down the stretch. And I'm like, we need a loss here. And it's counterintuitive to kind of root against your own team at times. But, for the Spurs' best interest long term, that's what needs to be done.
Well, if anything that we learned from the recent game versus the Nets is star power matters. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving just laid it on San Antonio. They had like 50-something points. It wasn't even the halftime yet combined. And that leads to why the Spurs need to do themselves a favor if they're looking at long-term. And I know short-term sucks. You get it. I get it. Yeah, seeing L's mount up, it's not fun. But the pain goes away because you realize in the long term that just ups their chances of landing a top 3 pick. But as of this recording, they've won 12 games and they're being competitive, as you mentioned, against Dallas. I got to ask you, Jimenez, do you think the way the Spurs are playing right now is quote unquote, they're kind of doing themselves a disservice in the long run when it comes to the draft 2023?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because, the Spurs right now, they look better. I mean, you see certain players coming into their own.
Right.
It's not consistent, though. I'll give you an example. We'll see Trey Jones go off, have a 16, 17-point game, 6 or 7 assists, and you're like, wow, we may have something here. And then the very next game kind of disappear. Jeremy Sochan in the past couple of weeks has had 2 games of 20 points or more. We're like, man, offensively, he's starting to get it. The free throws are going in one-handed, and then lays an egg. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that certain teams come in and it's harder to defend. I mean, I know against the Nets, the Spurs had just an awful time trying to defend Kyrie Irving. And but right now, if you look at it, though, I mean, come on, man, the Spurs have still lost 7 out of 10. So it's not like the Spurs are suddenly playing 500 ball.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked the story, you asked the question about whether or not the Spurs are hurting themselves. I was doing some math here. And this is the math. And this is why there are people who want the Spurs to win every single game and hope and pray that they make their way into the play-in tournament. Well, if you want to make your way into the play-in tournament, you essentially need to play 500 ball for the season. Because right now, the number 10 spot right now is 19-20. That's Utah. But let's just call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
41-41 will get you there, right? And the Spurs right now would need to go 29-16 the rest of the way to get to 500 by the end of the year. 29-16. That's a 644 winning percentage, which, by the way, in the NBA right now, only 3 teams in the NBA have a 644 winning percentage. So somehow the Spurs would need to kind of magically become a top 3 or 4 team the rest of the season, just to get to the number 10 spot in the play-in tournament. Why?
And we know that ain't gonna happen. That's not gonna happen.
No, it's not gonna happen. So the attention needs to be on 2 things. The attention needs to be on solidifying a top 3, 4, 5 position in the draft, or doing whatever you can to make that happen, and then also looking forward to the February 9 deadline of the trade deadline and what's going to happen to a Jakob Poeltl, what's going to happen to a Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott. Are these guys going to be dangled out there for future picks?
You're right. We look at Tankathon right now, and as of this recording, the Spurs are 12-25. They've lost 2 in a row, and Jimenez, they're out of the top 3 slots. The best shot at winning the draft is the Pistons. After that is the Hornets. And after that, number 3 is Houston, and then San Antonio.
Well,
before you finish your thought there, you know what? Let's take a break. Let's do that. Let's take a break. We'll get back. I want you to react to that. What the draft lottery simulator has Spurs falling out of the top 3 picks. Once again, we are joined by Michael Jimenez of San Antonio Sports Star. Follow him on Twitter at MikeESPN. He's back on air today. Yay, everybody. Make sure to check him out on San Antonio Sports Star. Well, before we continue our chat, I want to talk to you about betonline.net, your number 1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season. Well, that's over. But hey, you got the NFL season. Basketball is well underway. They got it all over at betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, guess what? You can even find those at betonline.net as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, that's where the game starts. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Michael Jimenez of San Antonio Sports Star and the new and improved halftime with Michael and Spence. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just called Jimenez and Spence. I'm just going by our last.
All right, Jimenez and Spence, which debuts today on San Antonio Sports Star. Jimenez will talk to you more about that in just a few minutes. So before the break, I gave you the updated draft lottery simulator via Tankathon, and the Spurs are out of the top 3 picks. Your reaction?
Well, a couple of things. It doesn't matter if the Spurs get the worst pick, the second worst pick, or the third worst record. The way that the NBA lottery works for 2023 is that the bottom 3 teams in the NBA have equal chances at number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so you can have the third worst record and still have just as good of an odds of winning the Wemby sweepstakes as the
Mhm.
team that has the worst record. Now, if you're the fourth worst record, which the Spurs are right now, it's still pretty decent odds. It's not that far off from 1, 2, and 3. And in fact, even spot number 5 is not that bad off as well from winning the overall lottery. So, that's the thing about it is that they've made it more equitable. It used to be back in the day, the bottom 3 teams had, a very, very good chance of winning
Right.
the lottery. It's not the case anymore. But what does matter, though, is what happens if you don't win the lottery. If you don't win the lottery, then you get slotted by your record, right? So even though the odds might be similar of winning the overall lottery, if you don't win it, you can fall back. So right now the Spurs are the 4th worst record in the league. But right now, I mean, if things went to crap in the lottery, there is a 2% chance that the Spurs would drop all the way to number 8 in picking. Not likely, but
Right.
it's still in the realm of possibility. But right now, you take a look at those 3 teams that are below the Spurs in the standings, the Detroit Pistons, the Charlotte Hornets, the Houston Rockets. Hate to say it, Spurs are better than all 3 of those teams. This is what it is.
Yeah.
The Spurs are a bad team, but they're not worst team in the NBA bad.
So it wouldn't be a total quote unquote loss if the Spurs were to, let's just say they follow this simulator right now and they fall at 4 or 5 or 6. They'll still get an impact player. It will just won't be on the Wemby Scoot level, would it be?
Well, I'm looking at 4 or 5. If they fall below the 5 spot and they suddenly have the 6th worst record in the league, then I'm going to worry there because then at that point there's a possibility of the Spurs, picking number 8 or 9, and that's not where I want the Spurs to be if they don't win the lottery. There are a lot of impact players on this upcoming draft. This upcoming draft is a lot of people consider it to be one of the best drafts the past 20 years, even outside of Wemby and Scoot Henderson. I mean, there's the Thompson twins are getting a lot of love there. It's funny how they're twins and one's a forward and one's a guard. But then you take a look at other players like when we talk about Amen Thompson, there's Nick Smith Jr. out of Arkansas, Cam Whitmore out of Villanova, Keontae George out of Baylor, Brandon Miller out of Bama, Walker out of Houston. A lot of good players out there. So the way that I look at it, Jeff, is when you have a strong draft like this, think about it this way. Scoot Henderson would have been the consensus number 1 pick if Wemby wasn't there, right? So if you get the number 2 pick, you're actually getting what traditionally would be the number 1 overall pick. If the Spurs get the number 5 pick, for example, then they're getting a pick that typically would normally be going 2 or 3. So there's a lot of value in this upcoming draft. And that's also another reason why I look at these things going on when it comes to the possibility of trading a Jakob Poeltl or a player, is because this is the draft that you want to be in. This is the draft that you want to have a top pick. Because there's some Spurs fans who reach out to me all the time, and it's just so bizarre, the thinking. They come out to me and they go, oh, well, there have been some drafts out there where there have been a bunch of busts. Not every draft is the same. Not every NFL draft, Major League Baseball draft, not every NBA draft is the same. There are some that are stronger than others. And the ones that are strong, people know that this is the one that you want to be in. And that's 2023. So a lot of Spurs fans out there who are like, no. I want them to be hooping, man. I want them to get to the play-in tournament. Dude, it's a treadmill to nowhere. You're moving but not going anywhere. And that's my hard part, Jeff, of looking at this team. Why would I want to fall in love with a team where I know that 8 to 10 of these guys are going to be gone in, 12 months?
Yeah, that's a strong point. I mean, even shorter with the trade deadline. I mean, who knows? It's not just the usual suspects, Jakob and Richardson or McDermott. It could be a package deal for them to move up, to acquire an assets, whether it be in draft or players. So, yeah, I mean, this team definitely could look different after the trade deadline. One other thing, too, you look at the Spurs schedule, and they got tonight against the Knicks, which we'll talk about in just a few seconds. Then they got, I guess, Tank Bowl, Pistons, Spurs after that. And then they play against the Celtics. That's going to be a tough out. And then the Grizzlies in a back-to-back situation. So who knows, that coin flip for the Pistons Spurs game. I mean, Spurs should win that game, but they could go 1-5, and that'll definitely help their draft lottery odds in the next 5 games, Jimenez.
And at that point, the season's over.
Yeah,
there's no more team tank versus team play-in. At that point, if they're having to have to play 700 ball to get the 10th,
I mean, the season could be practically over right now.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, it is right now. But it's just one of those where mathematically it just becomes foolish to be talking the other way.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, one thing I will let you know though is that you
that?
take a look at all the mock drafts. They have Wemby going out there as a center, but he doesn't really play the center type of thing. But you take a look at every single player basically ranked in the top 10, a bunch of 2s and 3s, man.
Mm-hmm. And the Spurs have plenty of those.
And the Spurs have plenty of those, but they can't do that thing where they're like, we're going to draft for position, therefore we're going to go after the best big man available if we don't get Wemby. That's not how it works. You get the best player. And if that means that best player is eventually going to challenge Vassell for the 2 spot, or is going to eventually challenge Keldon Johnson for the 3 spot, so be it. You just put talent on the floor and just try to figure it out from there.
Absolutely. Once again, we're joined by Michael Jimenez of San Antonio Sports Star, and we are discussing the Spurs, the state of the draft / tank right here on Locked On Spurs. When we get back, we're going to look at tonight's game, Spurs-Knicks. Can the Spurs sweep the season series against New York? We'll be talking about that and a lot more. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Michael Jimenez of San Antonio Sports Star. He is back on air today with the new show, Jimenez and Spence. So check that out. And Michael will talk to you more about that in just a few seconds. So Jimenez, Spurs-Knicks tonight out in MSG in the Big Apple, coming off that really, really bad loss. Spurs just it wasn't even I was there, Michael. Spurs, Nets, and Barclays. It was over before it began. When Kyrie Irving goes for a putback dunk. Yeah, that's not a good sign. But it was a massacre in Brooklyn.
I'm watching the game on my phone. I have the Bally app, and we were just enjoying the day over at SeaWorld, and I get the notification that the game's about to start. Starts buzzing my phone. So the day was over. We're in line for 45 minutes to get on a ride, and I call up the game, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, why is it that Kyrie Irving just decimates the Spurs every time? And then when he did that put-back dunk, I was like, oh, my God, I haven't seen Kyrie do that in 10 years. What the hell is going on? The Spurs looked out of sorts. It was over in a hurry. They looked – it just looked bad. And it was a disparity of talent,
Exactly.
It was one of those things to take a look at it going, how many of these Spurs players would actually get considerable minutes on this Nets team?
Mm-hmm.
Our starting 5 was basically the Nets backup 5.
Right.
And
it
was over.
Yeah. It was over before it began. I was just sitting there at my media seat. Just, is it over yet? That was my mood. Is it over yet? Is it over yet? I mean, surprisingly enough, Popovich was in a good mood. I got a chance to talk with him ahead of the game about Keldon Johnson. So, despite the loss, I think they knew it is what it is, as the kids say, Jimenez. But the Spurs are looking to sweep the regular season series against the Knicks. Again, they played in San Antonio already, and they beat New York 122-115. But once again, it starts with Julius Randle. He's going to be a handful for the Spurs tonight.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, Randle went off against the Suns the other day, 28 points, 16 rebounds. This Knicks team is very difficult to pinpoint because, right now they're fighting for a playoff spot. They want to get out of that position of the play-in tournament. They want to actually get one of the top 6 spots. And right now they're a game behind the 6th spot in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks are one of those teams, just like the Spurs, where they're a little bit more talented than San Antonio, but they're those teams, you don't know what team's going to show up. Is it going to be a team that's fired on all cylinders and all of a sudden Randall and the fellows are doing well? Or is it going to be a team that just gives up a lot of points and then can't find a way to make a bucket? Because that's who the Knicks are. I mean, the Knicks are essentially a 500 team, and they're a 500 team for a reason, because they're not very good, but they're also not very bad either. It just depends on which five shows up that day to start.
Yeah, Spurs coming into tonight's game with a 2-game losing streak, while the Knicks are on a 2-game win streak. So something's got to give there. As far as the last few games for New York, they have 4 straight games of connecting on more 3-pointers made than their opponent. So the Spurs definitely got to watch that 3 line versus New York. One thing I'm watching now too is the health of Devin Vassell. That was talked about after the game, Brooklyn, about how he's not completely there yet. That knee is still bothering him. He hasn't been looking the same. So keep an eye on that tonight as well. One other thing too is that historically the Spurs have had issues in MSG, Jimenez.
Yeah, it's the bright lights, right? I mean, that's the mecca of basketball in the NBA, is to play at MSG. And so it's exciting to see these players go out there and try to perform. But you mentioned Vassell. What exactly is that injury that he has? I know you say it's a knee, but is it? Have they explained exactly what's wrong with his knee?
No, they have not explained exactly what's wrong with the knee. All we have to go is what the injury report says, which I believe they say left knee soreness. I think that's what it is. I'll just double check here. And left knee soreness. Now, he was questionable before the game versus the Nets, but they cleared him. From Josh Richardson, he was asked about that after the Nets game. He said that he was not going to comment on that. Keldon Johnson got into a little bit of depth with that, saying that the team doctors would not have cleared him to play against Brooklyn if he wasn't 100%. So that's a good sign. But that's definitely something you got to keep an eye on. As not only just for tonight's game, but just moving on. One other thing too is for tonight's Spurs-Knicks game is that I look at this Knicks team and I never thought I'd say they're fighting for a playoff spot. That's bizarre. When was the last time you said that, Jimenez?
I know, it's so funny because the Spurs. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, our franchise 5 rings in 2 decades. Absolutely remarkable. Yep. The Knicks had one since 72, 71. It's early 70s is the last time the Knicks have had one, and it's awful because think about it, man. I mean, when you think about basketball, some of the places that you think of are New York City. And for them to go now 50 some odd years in a drought is ridiculous for that big of a media market.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Insane. And it's funny because, the last time they really had a chance was back in 99, and the Spurs took care of them then.
Yeah, exactly. The Spurs also coming into tonight's contest 12-25, 4 straight road losses as well for the Silver and Black Jimenez. And talking about that 3-point shot, while the Knicks have been hot from the 3 line the last 4 games, the Spurs in the last 7 games straight, Michael, have made fewer 3-pointers than their opponent. So, yeah, not good at all. And so the Spurs definitely got themselves a fight tonight out in MSG. Who do you got, Jimenez, Spurs or Knicks?
I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think. I think the Knicks at the end. It's going to be one of those games where the Spurs are in it with 3 to 4 minutes to go, and the Knicks somehow pull it out. Especially if Vassell's not 100%.
Even if they lose, that'd be the Spurs. I think Pop will still be in a good mood because he's just in love with New York City. He said that he said that he is a San Antonio guy, but that he does love himself some Big Apple. And after the game versus the Nets, everybody was in a rush from Pop to Keldon to Devin because everybody was going out to their dinner. Like they were going to have that big dinner, that Popovich dinner. Funny enough, Pop said that Tim Duncan, every time they were in New York City, would hate it when Pop would pick Italian because apparently that's all Pop picked in New York is Italian food. So, and he walked 80 blocks in the Big Apple. So he's definitely getting his
walk.
Yeah, exactly. New York. Yeah, there's a block and then there's a New York block. And trust me, I've experienced those New York blocks, and they're not fun at all. Hey, we're done talking. We want to hear from you. What do you think about the Spurs state of the tank slash draft 2023? You like where this team is going? If your team tank, you'd like to see them pick up a few more L's, or you think they'll be all right at the end of the day? And also, what do you think about tonight's Spurs-Knicks game? Let us know. You can let Mike know on Twitter at MikeESPNSA, and tell us once again, new show starting today, Jimenez.
Yeah, new show starts today. It's called Jimenez and Spence. It goes from 12 to 3. Man, we love people who call into the Kielbasa Smoke Meats phone line and reach out to us and be part of the show. We're trying to kind of figure out the format here because originally halftime was sports, pop culture, nostalgia. I'm going to try to bring back some pop culture references, bring back some of the music stuff. A lot of different formats going on with what we've got going on internally with the show and the commercial breaks and whatnot. It's a lot of spinning of the plates right now, but I think we're finally going to put it all together this month. I'm excited about it. I've been off the air for 2.5 weeks, but I want to thank everybody on Twitter for allowing me to piss you off from time to time, even while on vacation. And I'm about 2 weeks away from apologizing to Jeremy Sohan for his one-handed throws. No, it's fun, and we get going at 12 o'clock, and I hope people tune in.
Is that bet still on the line by you coloring your hair?
First of all, real fast, yes, the 35%. You would need to make probably 24 in a row to get back into that space. But when I texted you that Sohan's three-point shooting was finally above 20%, and you put me on blast on Twitter, shame on you, Jeff Garcia. Some things supposed to be held in confidence.
You have to put in that thing there, that message there. You have to put OR for off the record or OTR. Just put that OTR, and then I know exactly. I thought you were just gonna have some fun with it. I said, okay, Jimenez wants to have some fun. I said, you know what? I got your message. I'm like, he really has been itching to get back on the mic. This is the closest he's going to get back on the mic to get an audience. So let's get an audience for his take. That's how I read it as. I said, okay, he wants an audience. So let's do this. Let's do this, Jimenez. But next time I get an OTR, I'll be okay. This was between just for me and Jimenez. And hey, we thank you for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. Second listen, check out Locked On Sports. Everything you need in just under 30 minutes. So for Michael Jimenez, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put a lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.